Okay, let's see. We have two. All right, 3, 4. I don't know. Is Scott out of office this week, Marie, or do you
Yeah,
know?
he's out. He's out today.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good. Let's get started then. I will share my screen. Cool. So for the agenda today, we have a proposal from Marie, an in-progress proof of concept on a unified build process. The next thing I wanted to chat about is these two items, which is namely a subsequent iteration on the proposals workflow and how it relates to the TSC, and then do some housekeeping based on that. And actually, I think maybe we move this one up to the top since it's probably the most time sensitive. Does that work for you guys?
Yes.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
that's fine for me. Yep.
Then whoever wants to start for this topic, if maybe Gail, if you want to introduce it, and then y'all can take it away.
Sure. So you guys know me. Steve Winslow is legal counsel at Linux Foundation, and he helps all of our projects with different structures and programs. And one of these things that he helps us with is standing up conformance programs. And he has some slides to share. And I know that Michael had some things he wanted to discuss as well. As you guys know, Michael's not at LF. He's a Facebook employee, and he's our governing board chair for Magma.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining. We covered this at a high level with the tech a couple of weeks ago, and so this is kind of like a good segue to figuring out what we want to do for the conformance program for Magma. So at a high level, just for those who aren't aware of the conformance programs for Kubernetes and for other programs, a conformance program enables an open source project to define what kind of products and services can use the trademark of the project. So it defines who can call themselves like powered by Magma, or who can call themselves Magma certified or whatever, right? So there's definitely it's the marriage of two disciplines. One discipline is a technical kind of decision of what it means to be Magma powered, but there's also like a marketing, operational, go-to-market kind of thing from the outreach perspective, from which Allison, the outreach committee will also run, right? And so this has, in the reason why we are doing, the reason why it is important is because for our downstream users, right, the users who are using our products, projects, our code downstream, we want them to know, right? Like obviously it'll be the name of the company who's providing the service up front and center, right? But we also want to create a program to have them show off or have them kind of identify us as the source of some of the technology they are using to give us more visibility and to also draw more investment back to us, right? So there's an advertising element part of it, right? And then going forward as the project, and we don't have that problem right now, but as the project becomes more and more popular and there's more investment in it, we will want to kind of more tightly control who can call themselves a project and who doesn't, right? That's not a problem right now, but you take the more popular projects, it does become an issue later on. And so we have it, one of our goals that we established on the governing board is to by the end of the year, establish a program by which people can basically slap a powered by Magma kind of logo or branding on their products or services, right? And then, and in doing so, hopefully to channel investment, channel visibility back to our project, right? So that people recognize that, but also sets clear boundaries for when they can't use it. And so I have, in the meeting notes, I have just, basically I've done a copy and paste of the Kubernetes conformance program, but I've just kind of did a global control alt find for those of you who want to take a look, sort of control find and replace for Magma. And so the thing that I think, the TSC, we have to decide as a group here is a couple of things, right? Like the most important thing is, or the most scalable way to do these kind of, to set up these things is to have like an API conformance program or a set of APIs and to run a test suite against them, right? That sort of strikes the balance between, something that is deterministic while being flexible to lots of different use cases, right? I'm not sure that we have the bandwidth to set up something so, so robust, this by the end of this year. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And so what I've proposed in the document, and I'm happy to take comments, is basically a binary checksum test, right? But also this idea of what I'm calling like configuration customizations, right? Certain customizations that they can make to get it running in production. So this is sort of tries to balance both. So that was a lot of information, and I'm assuming that folks sort of know a little bit about how these programs work in other projects. But I'm going to stop there. Does anybody have any questions or, does anybody have any questions? Hunter, I know you and I talked about a binary checksum as the easiest path forward. I don't know if I stated in the document that would be the last 6 versions that would qualify. I don't know if that's what you were thinking or if we wanted, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think as far as the binary checksum, that's probably still the easiest way to achieve this like non-technical goal at the moment, given how the project's technical implementation is still very much like nascent and in flux. Like it's the goal is for it to be production ready, but like the way that we achieve that is still like under active development. But to answer the question of what does it mean to pass the binary checksum test, I think that probably needs to be to take a dependency on one of Phil's tasks for the or projects for the sprint, the next three weeks, which is defining exactly what we want to support, like what the project is going to explicitly say, we support a release of this type and we will support it for this long, etc. Because so far it's just been, okay, we tag a release, we tested it to some degree, and then there's no explicit affordance of how long we'll support a release. So it's been implicit so far, and that was fine when it was just Facebook internal project with Facebook internal partners, because if they ran into an issue from an old version, we would just request that they upgrade. But I think that obviously is not going to be a workable pattern for an open source, open governance project. So I think saying, okay, specifically which version should pass this test should be informed very explicitly by the project's declaration of how we'll choose to support versions, going forward. And because the short answer is the last 6 is, in my opinion, a little bit too rough, because 2 things. One, we use like semantic versioning, so it's like, well, it's the last 6 patches, it's the last 6 minors, last 6 majors.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is we'd previously done a minor release every like 4 times a year, every once a quarter, but the plan is to switch that pattern up to be progressively more of a modern release plan. And currently the in-between ground is we're planning to try to have the option to do a release at most every 3 weeks. So yeah, if Phil, if you want to say a word or two on that.
No, I mean, you just hit on most of the relevant issues there. You know, Michael, I think when we talked about it and when we talked with others about the conformance program, we were suggesting, you know, the last major release or the last 2 major releases, but we're in the process right now of completely redefining what is a release. And if we're going to go to something similar to, you know, an agile based release approach where we're releasing often, you know, perhaps every three weeks or every month, we may need to be careful in how we phrase the supportability period.
So this is
but we
just,
can work through that. I mean, that's a detail in the language.
no, that's great. So I guess this is a question for you, Steve. What is the relationship between enabling a downstream user to say that their thing is powered by Magma, and then the supportability or the support timeline? Like, are those two things, do those things tightly correspond to each other, or do some projects decouple that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Michael. And I think part of what I'm trying to think through with it, and I think is maybe a bit of a challenge here, is just in most other projects where we've worked on conformance programs, it's not because it's not tied specifically to like a binary checksum to you must be using exactly this binary. It's more the kind of set of functionality that's defined as being the conformance criteria. And yeah, that could be a, you know, very detailed, very broad set of the functionality, or it could be a limited scope of it. But whatever it is, kind of defining conformance in terms of the functionality through, you know, API interfaces or whatever it is for that project, versus it being exactly this specific binary. And I think part of the reason for that is, and I will come to your answer on supportability because I think it ties back into this, but on the you know, part of going back to what you were saying about trademarks, I think part of the idea of having the conformance program is to, as you were saying, to distinguish between what is the project itself versus what is a downstream thing that is built on top of, but still compatible or interoperable with the upstream project. And so just if we're talking about just the binary itself that's distributed by the project, I guess I would tend to think of that as being more just Magma itself rather than being kind of Magma conformant or the definition of Magma conformant. So I think that's where I'm still, and I'll say I know very little about Magma, what it does on from the technical perspective, but just kind of how I've seen it with other conformance programs. I think I haven't really seen that sort of binary exact checksum taken to talk about the Magma conformant part. So I do want to come to your question on supportability, but Hunter, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, I can just give like 2 quick points on that. One is, yeah, like I mentioned before, just maybe in a year or so, that would be, you know, more the interface level, and maybe the gRPC level, I think would be one potential option, would be a reasonable thing to try and move toward. But I think to answer the other question of like the difference between Magma itself as a set of binaries versus powered by Magma as a set of binaries, one of the models that is like has been developed over time is like we're not trying to package a ready, like a plug-in solution just from the core development like team itself. The idea is that there are like value-added resellers within the community that also contribute back to the project, that add additional functionality, either targeting specific platforms, whether that's like particular boxes or cloud targets, specific use cases, etc. Whether it's like 5G or fixed wireless access and things like that. And so, you know, how much can they change the core of what they're using before it's no longer Magma?
Okay, got it. So then in that model, the powered by Magma would be, if I'm following it, would be still use these binaries with these specific checksums, but then you are building something on top of that or configuring it in some particular way, still with those same binaries, but configuring it in a way that is still going to be within the bounds of what conform. So the conformance will still define how far you can stray before you go outside being powered by or being conformant. Is that the idea?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as what Michael and I had chatted about, that was my understanding of like the middle ground for what's achievable
Okay.
versus what's like, yeah, what would be useful.
And achievable, that's in terms of like time frame by the end of this year versus then further down the road looking to expand. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll do some thinking about that. I think that might be workable, but I want to chat with some folks internally here too. But then, Michael, so then to your question about the supportability and kind of versioning, just one thing that we do see with a lot of our conformance programs that they do tie conformance pretty tightly to specific releases. And I think typically it is to more of a major release sort of thing, but either the idea being that when someone is getting themselves validated as conformant, it's for this specific release, this specific version of the software. And that's, a year or 2 years from now, that's not going to be meaningful to any of the end users, anyone out in the community. So the idea is typically that we see is that conformance will be valid for a period of time or for a set number of releases. And then someone, in order to remain conformant, will have to keep rolling forward. They can still, we've often seen it where they can still maintain older ones, but they need to keep staying current with recent releases in order to maintain conformance. And then that naturally kind of brings everybody along the path of continuing to participate in the development of the new versions as they go out.
Cool. I don't want to monopolize all of our time here, but it sounds like the next step is for Phil and I to work a little close. We'll figure out what the right language is on the technical side, and then after that, after we finalize that, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we can take that to Allison's side of the house on the outreach side and kind of unit test that against some partners to make sure that they're working. They will be able to benefit from that given those definitions. But let's table. It sounds like we have a good path forward. Again, we don't want to take up all the time, so maybe we'll throw it back to Hunter.
And just real quick in parallel, Michael, I'll go ahead and start. I'll chat internally about some of the binary conformance ideas just to get the temperature internally on that, and then I'll also get the terms and conditions that we'll use for it in kind of similar documentation going. So we can have a follow-up discussion that picks up some of the points on that.
You should have access to that doc. We'll send it to you.
I haven't gotten that from you yet, Michael. So I need you to, if you can just pop into the chat for me directly. I don't have a link from it yet. But
it's linked in the team notes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Steve, can you speak a little bit as to in the process or life cycle of this, when it will go to the governing board for approval?
Typically what we see other projects doing is basically when it is close to, so yeah, typically we'll see governing board get notified about it earlier on, just saying this is in process, people are working on this, but typically to go to the governing board to authorize it as part of their oversight of the trademark assets for the project, typically we see that happening when it is close to ready to go out the door, where there's a handful of vendors who are ready to sign up so that it can be approved by them and then launched pretty rapidly with often see it where it's like a press splash of here are the initial participants. So I would say probably when it's closer to being ready to go out the door, that way they can be approving it in the form, in substantially the form that it's going to go out in.
Thank you, Steve.
We'll do it after the TSC and the outreach committee approves. Cool.
Thanks.
Hunter?
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. Excited for that. So the next step is more, just typical agenda for the TSC. We can go over some proposals, specifically Marie's proposal, and then we can go over a meta topic that I had if we have time at the end. So Marie, do you want to share your screen, or should I share and then you talk over it?
Yeah, do you mind sharing?
Cool.
Yeah, so this is more of it's not like a change that we're trying to make into Magma right away. It's something that we're like sort of exploring. Our build system, like we have for each of our component, we have a slightly different build system, and for C and C++, like we have slight correction issues sometimes, and like the speed, like we're just suffering through a lot of problems. So in order to improve this, we're trying to explore, supporting Magma build with Bazel, which hopefully, if this goes great, in the long run, this can be our unified build system, which would be really great. This issue in particular just focuses on Bazelifying one specific service on the Access Gateway to see whether it's feasible, what to just, scope out what it might look like if we decide to Bazelify the entire program, the project. So yeah, you can go through, I've listed alternatives considered, reasons and goals. So you can go through it. But just the vote here would just indicate it would be like a green light on committing the POC into the repo.
We're on Buck right now, right?
No, we're not on Buck. We're on like a combination of CMake for C++ and make files for the rest of the system, I think.
Got it.
It's,
Definitely not Buck for C++, guys.
What? Sorry, what?
Sorry.
I said definitely not Buck for C++.
Yeah, so the like fun little detail was that when we went open source, we actually had to migrate away from Buck because the open source Buck doesn't really do what we need. Yeah, so it's either stick with what we have or maybe migrate to Bazel.
Hey Mary, this is Rafael speaking.
Yes.
For me, I mean, the main issue that we are facing right now is that with the importation of the 5G code, we in like 6 months went from like 1,000 C++ file to compile the ME to 2,000. That's for me is the main reason that build is getting longer now. And I don't know about Buck or Bazel versus CMake, but currently we are using Ninja as compared to Make. And here we at OAI we already also did a switch from Make to Ninja, and we made some benchmarking that was already a huge improvement. But for me, the main issue is that we are adding file and we keep adding file with 5G. And I don't think it's CMake versus Bazel will make any kind of difference.
Yeah, so we're not really going for build time improvements for like the initial build. Bazel just gives us like much better cache support. So if we have in repo cache, then subsequent builds should take a lot shorter. It also has a pretty extensive support for remote caching as well. So if we want to enable that in CI, that could be done too.
Yeah, so to me, I can mention two things, and then we can have a couple other if other people want to bring up points, and then we can take a vote. One comment on the proposal itself is, in my mind, the big win, aside from like the caching, of course, is going to be really nice. I think the main issue we have right now is there's just parts of our code base where it's not reasonable to add tests for, or unit tests at least, especially for people who aren't experts in that part of the code base. So like as an example, in our Go code base, you can add a test as easily as just like dropping a file name underscore test.go in the same directory in line with the test with the file under test. Write the functions that you want to run, and they'll automatically get run as part of the the existing test commands. That's not really the case for a lot of the rest of the code base. And so part of the big win of this, aside from just general better eng wins and better cache improvements, is specifically it should be trivially easy to add unit tests, and that's something that we're lacking right now. So then what I had in mind for like the voting on this proposal, aside from it being publicity oriented of like this is what we're working on right now, I view this as a proposal of moving toward Basel of like, okay, we're not committing to it, but is this something that the TSC wants to sign off on as like, this is the direction that we want to take the project's build system. So yeah, if there's comments on the content and or that idea of like, this is a directional vote that we would be taking here in a bit. Okay, cool. Then let's go ahead and take a vote. So we have 4 present, so all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
I
All opposed say no. No. Oh, sorry. I take my no back.
Nay, nay, nay,
nay,
nay, right?
thank
Or is
you.
it no? Or is it, I don't know. What is
Nay.
it? It's like the horse.
Okay, cool. That passes then with the idea that the direction of the project's build system is moving toward Basel. Cool. So we're out of time, but I'll just give a 20-second sneak peek of what my plan is for the next sync. Namely, I updated our proposals workflow, which is previously if the proposal was opened and it wasn't targeting the TSC, it was unspecified how to get it actually approved and merged. So the change now is the TSC is the serialization point, and but with the default that it's deferred out to particular code owner teams for input on whether the project for iterating and input on whether it should be accepted from a technical perspective. But we can talk about that more next time. Thanks everybody, and yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
I won't. I will be in vacation.